Yes, we have a new episode, new guest. Thanks for joining us, Chelsea, all the way from VA.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, and for people who don't know about you, of course, I know you're a big name in the industry, and especially Virginia, and the empowerment movement, I would say. But tell people a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am born and raised right here in the Richmond, Virginia area. I was a social worker for about 10 years doing clinical work prior to moving to more of the community work. And in 2018, I started and now co-host a running radio show and podcast called Race Capital. It's really geared towards Richmond, and our slogan is Race Capital, where we interrogate racial narratives in the fallen capital of the Confederacy, Richmond, Virginia. And then in 2019, I started and co-founded Marijuana Justice, where we organize to bring equitable legalization to dismantle the war on drugs. So I am really into this community work. I'm into Black liberation. I consider myself an abolitionist and a student of abolition. And I'm really here to make sure that we bring that types of narrative and this work of cannabis to the South and the United States.
Yes, yes, that is huge. And for anybody who doesn't know, of course, just bringing them up to speed, where are we, in Virginia with the state of cannabis?
Well, Virginia is in one of those quote unquote gray areas. So in 2021, we repealed the prohibition of simple possession. So what that means, it is actually legal to possess up to 1 ounce on your person. There is no public consumption, so you can't just walk down the street in Virginia and smoke. But you can have it on you. The law enforcement can see it on you as long as it's not more than 1 ounce. You are allowed to grow 4 plants per household. And we also had our records sealed for folks with minor misdemeanor possession charges. So in Virginia, we have it so that it is decriminalized and there is some legal possession, but there is still no adult use regulation sales. So you can't buy it here from a quote unquote legal or licensee. And we do have medical cannabis here in Virginia as well. But again, that's not necessarily accessible for everyone, whether it's with a medical card, whether it's the type of weed that they want or the prices.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of great things. Of course, the decrim around it, and I think that an ounce is low, but hey, in the state of Maryland, where we're about to have it on the ballot, we have 10 grams, as a decrim threshold. So that's one of the lowest I think in the nation.
Yeah, that's real trash. We're gonna have to do something about
That is, it's real trash. And even the companion bill that goes with the ballot referendum, it's only 1.5 ounces. And
that.
I was
Right.
on a call with like some Marylanders the other day, and they've been pushing, of course, legalization. And as I told them, the biggest thing for me is not to legalize at any cost, but the biggest thing for me is to make sure that we're gonna get there, guys. And the people who have been, medicating or doing it therapeutically are still gonna do it. But the thought is we want to make sure that, this is a chance of opportunity for people, our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. We want to make sure, people who've had it on their record, who this is impacted. We want to make sure that, they see the light of day, and then also the economic opportunities, and to make sure that it actually comes to fruition. Is not just a buzzword that draws dollars. So
Yeah, and I just want to jump in and said, maybe we don't legalize it at any cost. And marijuana justice, we don't believe that either. We adopted a campaign phrase that from folks up in New York and legalize it right. A lot of folks were just legalize it. Where we really want to be able to define what right is for our communities, particularly Black folks, Black Southerners, poor people, those that have really been impacted by the drug war. So there are many things to do before we start handing over revenues and profits to certain entities. And like you said, it's really not that weed is not accessible. It absolutely is accessible. And that's why they want to commercialize it so much. But now, how can we make it legal and it not still be something that's criminalizing our communities? I mentioned that we have possession that is legal, but something that we don't have, yes, we don't have regulated sales, but we also haven't released anybody that's incarcerated. I mentioned that we seal records, but people are still locked up for marijuana charges and offenses, different marijuana related offenses, as well as parents are still losing custody of their children for testing positive for using marijuana, which if you're an adult over 21, you're allowed to be using it. So our laws are still not caught up with each other. And we all know who is going to feel that type of enforcement with those same laws that are on the books right now. And it's going to be the same people that have been bearing the brunt of the drug war for the last 40 years or 50 years. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you you brought up one key point about being a canna parent, right? And so I was on a Marijuana Matters call. You probably know some of these people at Marijuana Matters DC. It's all one small canna community. But I was on a call this past fall, and I had my kids in the background, but I was still like being a speaker and handling a call, but responding to them, and they were just, they saw the canna parent, or they at least they could hear it, and they were like, well, don't apologize, for your kids distracting you. This is what parents have to do. They got to juggle Zoom calls and things of that nature. But they highlighted the point that, like, you could be a parent and you could be a cannabis consumer. There's nothing bad about that. Don't feel bad about it. And hey, at the end of the day, the plan is natural, right? So there's nothing to feel bad about. And and then I think I kind of remember seeing 10-15 years ago, it was an Oprah episode where she had soccer moms on there that were talking about them experimenting with cannabis, like when the kids was gone. And mind you, this is like 10, 12, 15 years ago, so this was some time ago. This wasn't any time recently. But it was basically them talking about their quality of life. Their quality of life went up. They were able to interact with their children differently. And then some of them used to drink. So they talk about how they, no longer drink, and now they're like more sociable, able to lose weight, all these types of other things that, they wouldn't have imagined beforehand, because they had always believed that stigma, that reefer madness stigma.
Yeah, the marijuana mamas that really kind of pushed this medical conversation forward for a long time were highlighted. And I think you mentioned too, some white, you said soccer moms, I heard white moms. And, I think it also depends on like really making sure that we represent, that face of canna parents. I'm a mom. My daughter's 8. She's right in the other room. She knows exactly what I do. This is my full-time job. I'm always talking about weed. And so she's really aware of, what I do. I answer all the questions for her. I don't necessarily consume in front of her, but sure. I obviously do partake. And so just being able to show, what people look like, what consumers look like, as well as what advocates look like. Because yes, we can show a certain face, but let's also remember who has been the face of the drug war for such a long time, and how we need to really flip that on its head.
Sure, for sure. And I would say that there, several things you brought up, and it's several things that I kind of, like try to mention and try to talk about, is like I think that you have an important role to play in the advocacy role, because you have to continue to uplift what they would call the legacy market, right? Mm-hmm. Because I believe that people who have been impacted by the successful war on drugs, right? Because it was a success. People who have been impacted by the successful war on drugs should have opportunities, right? So people who are getting released from prison for cannabis related charges, of course, that hasn't happened yet in Virginia, but when that does start happening, people who are getting released for cannabis related charges, they should be like kind of first preference to get training and be able to assume these jobs. It's crazy that people who were ostracized or kept out of the market, whether it be from a business entrepreneurship standpoint or from just being a worker employee.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add to that list someone to benefit from the revenues, right? Like I think a lot of time we only conceptualize or talk about the opportunity from a business standpoint, but the state is going to benefit from the revenue. So also directing where those revenues go to make sure they're also benefiting those that have been impacted by the war on drugs. Because not everybody impacted is going to want anything to do with it.
Yeah, what programs are going to come from this, right?
Right.
You know, what roads are we going to fix in our local area because of this? So
Or
yeah,
who are we going to give money to? Like, I really want to even like shift our mindset of why. Yes, we can reinvest in roads and like clean up and things like that. But I also want to talk about like guaranteed income directly to people
Ooh,
that have been impacted.
UBI. That'd be nice. UBI.
Yeah,
That'd be nice.
I didn't say UBI. I didn't say UBI.
Oh,
I think
okay. Not UBI, but some type of guaranteed basic
like
income.
guaranteed income and UBI is very different for listeners, and
Mhm.
I take a strong stance against that. I want to educate folks that may not understand the differences. UBI for listeners is universal basic income. Basically everyone gets the same thing. Guaranteed income is more of a repair type of payment where those that have been harmed, and it's an equity movement, those that have not gotten these types of advancements then receive the revenue. Not everyone receives it on the same level, right? So that's a really big difference that I think is important for people to know. It's not that everyone gets it; it's those that have been harmed get it, and it's a way of equity and trying to get us back to whole. But just to add that to people's mindsets, some folks up in Chicago, Illinois, have been talking about this for a while with their R3 movement of how to get those monies into a guaranteed income form. I think this is more of the revolutionary sense that we need to be thinking, because we know that those revenues are not going to come back to our communities. We know that people are being gentrified out of those communities that are receiving the revenue. And we also know those that receiving the revenue, because so many people have been hurt, those are people that are governed by the folks that are still creating the harms, right?
Yeah,
So giving an example of, a lot of times in these bills, we want to provide funds to areas that have been most harmed. Well, when we provide those funds, we're giving it over to council people that are continuing those harms in most times, right?
yeah.
And that's when we have to look of, well, how do we actually redistribute it? How do we write it in so it actually reaches our people? And as a social worker for 10 years, I can tell you a lot of that money that's meant for the community does not reach the community. So that's
Yeah.
again why I just wanted to bring up again, making sure that we find innovative ways for folks to benefit off of the legalization, because capitalism and business is a really hard place to be, much less sustain. And if we want a long-term benefit from legalization, then we got to start thinking a little bit different of how to get the revenues.
I mean, I like that. And so you know now the definition, guys, of UBI and GBI. But I definitely like that because I'm a proponent, especially about the money, uh, about it going back to like the most local level. So like for me, I wanted to go back to the municipal, the town government, the county government, as opposed to the state legislature, and then the state legislature appropriating a certain amount each year to different programs. You know, I would definitely, want a good bulk of those funds to go right back to the local jurisdiction.
Right.
Um,
And most legislators, and just to give an example in Virginia, so if we were to, in 2021, y'all, when we passed the decriminalization, I will say that we had a plan to legalize with regulation by 2024. And some of those proponents that have now been laid on the table, which means they're dead, is because Virginia lost our election this past November, and our entire House and administration flipped back to conservatives, where before we were a Democrat state. So I'll just say that. But in 2021, what we were able to pass with an all Democrats Senate, House, and administration is that we actually had what we called a cannabis equity reinvestment fund. And so 30% of all of the state revenues went into this fund that would then be overseen by an advisory board at the state level, and mostly to just make sure that those funds got right back to the municipal level. And within that, the regulators were also going to write in what it took for the local municipal levels to be able to receive that. So just because you're selling it doesn't mean you automatically get your 3% or get this revenue. There are also some things that you just have to meet in order to do that. I'm bringing this up because there are ways, and we took this language straight from Illinois. And so there are ways that we can create this fund. You mentioned before about people being priority for licenses. We also had in there that if you had a prior misdemeanor weed offense, that you would qualify for an equity license. So there are ways to write that in, and many of us have been trying to do that for a while. And those pieces did pass in 2021 when, again, we had a more Democrat General Assembly. But So right now, that's really where we have stopped, and I think that's what has stopped Virginia from really going forward. Is that many of our legislators, many of our stakeholders, voters, residents understand that we were on the way to legalizing it to to being one of the most equitable states in the country, and then we lost the election, and that really turned things on its head. So people know what they want, and they're not just going to accept any type of regulation that's coming.
And that was something, of course, I was going to bring up was, I had mentioned several times a couple of years ago that Virginia was lapping us in progressive policy, and one of the very last big things was the passage of 2021, and then of course, as you said, unexpectedly Youngkin won, or expectedly some people, but Youngkin ended up winning and kind of like stalemated the I guess the beginning of the rec process, because from my understanding, the timeline got moved up initially, and then Youngkin came in and kind of like slowed things down, and it's now delayed and on a later timeline again.
Well, not to get too nuanced in that, but what happened after 2021 is that when we legalized possession, a lot of legislators get in this like scared mode of we can't have this gray area. And so they talked about early sales and speeding it up. Now, we did not want that. The speeding it up is actually very much in the corporation's interest, and they know that. And so they were actually using the fact that we had, repealed the prohibition of simple possession as a way to gain corporate interest. So I just really wanted people to know that when they start talking about early sales and limited entry or limited market access, that means that they want the first movers, those big MSOs, usually medical operators, to have first mover advantage. And then they'll say, this is just to make sure that we don't have this gray area. And then what ends up happening, and has happened in every single state so far, is that they never start their actual equity program. So every state that has given early sales has never started their equity program in the way that they have intended. And these equity operators and small businesses, whether they're equity or not, have now these last mover advantages, which are disadvantages, honestly. And so this is why a lot of us talk about day one equity. It
That's why
actually
I want my equity up front. I want my equity up front for sure.
up front, exactly. And the day one means that our equity came way before the doors open, right? Because we need the financial investment first before we can even, a lot of equity folks need that advantage and that investment in order to get their brands going. And so, if folks are hearing, particularly in Maryland, about early access, limited access, it's really just big talk for a big bank about to stay little bank.
For sure. And I've realized this because I've been around long enough in the Maryland medical market to see MSOs close small mom and pops, and max out, on amount of licenses they could have, especially dispensaries. Like I think it's either 3 or 4. But yeah, I've seen them max out, and the way that I've seen is like I've seen some quality take a dive, right? Because like for me, I'm a big craft beer person, right? So I can't wait until like there's a bigger like craft cannabis market where you really have like people who specialize, and that's why I don't mind the brands that have good caliber, but they don't have as many strands, right? So they but they're only making 2 or 3 flavors, 2 or 3 strands, but they're not as big as a SunMed or something like that. But I appreciate those boutique businesses and craft businesses that care about it.
Yeah.
And so, do you think in the recreational market that's upcoming, will there be a boom of craft cannabis, or will there be room for craft cannabis? I know somebody asked me that yesterday, on the town hall.
Well, I will say that in places like Maryland, there is still like a chance. I think that Maryland is still looking for an opportunity to bring small businesses in, and people can demand that. In Virginia, we are so conservative, and our legislators have actually appointed a task force that is doing everything it can to barely even regulate adult use. I don't know if they're going to regulate edibles because they've read so much about what it can do to kids. And if we do regulate it, I think that they'll just give it to big box businesses and probably are not interested right now in those kind of small craft cannabis places. And then I hate to say this, but I'm really here from a Black liberation stance. Is that I have seen a lot of craft beer places. Virginia is actually, Richmond specifically, is one of those craft places, but it is much harder to get those type of exceptions when you look like us. To be very honest, so if craft cannabis comes about, I think it will be in a backroom way that more privileged groups will be able to do that, but right now in Virginia, I don't see that happening in the law. I don't think they want to do that. And this is honestly why many of us are saying, well, then don't legalize it yet, because then we're never going to be able to change it. Let's build this up. Let's actually pass a good bill. And like this is going to be a new industry that's going to last forever. Waiting 1 or 2 years is actually not going to hurt very much unless we're going to continue to enforce the criminalization of the drug war. That is what's hurting us. And that's why at Marijuana Justice, we really focus on the criminal code to repeal that as much as possible, while folks are still looking at the regulation lens that we know will be changing for history. But many folks will never actually look back on the people still in jail, the people facing the crimes. So I'm excited for the opportunities. I hope the craft cannabis things start. But in places like Virginia, it's going to be hard.
I mean, you put a realistic spin on it. I think that, for me, I definitely want to see the craft cannabis industry grow, the ability for micro grows, things of that. But I, also speaking to the craft, I also want to be able to see you guys have a pretty decent plant limit. I want to also be people to be able to home grow and get their cottage business license, right? So, I want people to be able to, sell what they grow from home, and it doesn't have to be just personal use, especially going through testing. I want everybody to be able to have products who are properly tested and things like that. But I would love for them to allow cottage business licenses as well. So it's a little bit different from necessarily a micro brick and mortar facility. But I think that home growth is important. And I think one of the things you mentioned in Maryland, and one of the biggest issues I had was, if you look at the way that the companion bill is written, it's only going to expunge people's record who have cannabis as their only charge. So many people of color, that's not their circumstance, right? A lot of times when you're arrested, 3 out of 4, what they say, Black males are going to encounter the criminal justice system at one point in their life, so they're going to be tacked on with multiple charges. They might be caught with cannabis, then, it's a simple assault or a trespassing, whatever random charges they might be. But because it's more than just cannabis, you don't apply for that expungement. Right. So I just see that as like that's one of those policies where if you read it, right, if you read it on Facebook quick enough and you see expungements, you're hype about it. But then somebody who's a policy wonk like myself, who reads between details, starts highlighting and questioning things, you look at it and you're like, wait, that doesn't actually free that many people, or that what a bureaucratic red tape that is. Like you could just see the provisions sometimes after just reading policy after policy, and you're like, well, how many people does this help?
Yeah. Right? And I mean, what you bring up is really important, because the parameters of how we are expunging records is probably what we're going to be looking at as we release people incarcerated. And that's what you said about expungement. We were able to do that with, even if you had multiple charges, and just do the solo charge. But what we had seen in Virginia is that when they were releasing people, they were only going to release those that were in jail for only a marijuana offense. And everyone knows that marijuana is the gateway drug to criminalization. So if law enforcement is going to get you on a marijuana offense, they're going to get you on something else. Like, that's kind of the point, is to up the charges and always upgrade the charges. And so the way most DOCs call that is the most serious offense. It's also called MSO, which I think is interesting. And then to go even more nuanced is that most localities don't file the offenses by cannabis, by marijuana, because it's not usually the most serious offense. So what that means, it takes even more money and like time and a budget expense to go and expunge those records or to release people, to find those names. And that's just more reason for legislators to say, no, we don't want it because it's going to cost money. Let's just get the people out with the solo charge. Right. And so these conversations are really important to say, well, let's look at how many people it's going to help. And let's make sure we're framing our conversation that way.
For sure, for sure. And I, I appreciate, of course, what you do and all the advocacy, that you do, because we need more people like you in Maryland, right? Abolitionists. I think you met my friend Gabriel Acevedo, Delegate Gabriel Acevedo. He's one of those people, and you probably seen in Maryland. He'll vote against legalization if it's not equitable, and he has, right? Like, he's proven it, many times over. And his bill, and Senator Carter's bill, a lot of time they speak most directly to what the community wants, right? But like, you see a lot of times that like they might not get the favorite nod by leadership, but when you look at like the quality of the bills, you can see that Senator Carter and Delegate Acevedo, they were cloaked in reparations. They were cloaked in, equity, diversion, the diversity, inclusion. They were cloaked in those type of things. And then you look at the other one, and the other one just had a bunch of compromises and things that weren't really going to be helpful, right? And the funnier thing is like it seems like their bills were written by someone who understood their community that they were writing. Like, you know what I mean? Like the other bill was led by a white guy from Baltimore County, and then these two bills were led by black officials from Montgomery County and Baltimore City. And
well,
so,
Martin, the white legislators, they're still writing it for their community. Let's be clear. They're writing it for their constituents. They're writing it for their corporation. They're writing it. That's their community, right? So when they come with these bills that don't come with it, we got to remember they're writing it for their people.
For sure. And when you say for their people, a lot of times it's for the business aspect, right? Like you'll never see a dispensary in Potomac, Maryland, right? Because of zoning laws. Yeah. Like you know what I mean? You'll never see a dispensary in the richest area of Maryland, right? Because the thought is like it's not supposed to be there. You'll never see a lot of dispensaries, in some of the roughest neighborhoods in Baltimore City, right? Like, but those are some of the areas that could really use the boom from the boom from sales, right? So it's certain things that are planned, and after being in politics, it sucks, but you realize this. So like, no, I was going to ask you one question.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you that, do you have faith in Maryland? Are we going to do right by black people this time around? And I say this with a serious face. Are we going to do right by black people this time around?
Who is we?
Well, I say we, right, because I'm one of the people now. They call me the cannabis councilman, right? So I'm the person that has to make sure I'm asking for this for the community. Make sure I'm meeting with the different groups to make sure we have a unified message of what we want. And so like when I say we, I'm talking about the people in Maryland that are trying to pass it. I understand that there's different factions, people that pass it by any means, and people that want to pass it, for reparations and equality. But at the end of the day, all of our voices are going to be at the table, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. So my hope is always with the people, right? So anything positive that comes out of this is going to be because of the people. My hope in the institution of doing the people right is less, right? I'm just going to be very honest with that. I've already told folks I'm an abolitionist, which means I actually do not believe. I'm a realist, right? I do not believe that the institution is going to do by black people unless black people absolutely make the demand. And that's how the positives come out of this, right? Power exceeds nothing without demand. So it's like, I have hope in the people. And I know I'm working, I've talking with you, talking to a lot of people in Maryland that really want this to happen the right way. And that gives me hope. That allows me to even lend my time to help in Maryland because yes, marijuana justice is born and grown in Virginia, but our goal is to really make this something that we can talk about nationally for Black folks and for us, so that we can have more of us at all of these tables. So my hope is always with the people.
Absolutely. I mean, because I think that, we should all learn about plants, right? Like one of the things is like, I think we should all learn how to grow our own food, right? It's important to learn how to grow your own food. So not just cannabis, but at an early age, if you taught, agriculture, that would be
Mhm.
important because you realize that, like, I think that I told somebody 15 years ago, cannabis is the biggest cash crop, legal or illegal. And, you can see in states where legalizing has proven itself to be the case. Cigarettes aren't as attractive as they once were, right? Like when you get cannabis legalized everywhere.
Yeah.
And of course, hemp being legalized. So, the thought is like, as I see a lot of the people that I grew up with, and they go into all different types of forms of life and all different ways, right? I know that a lot of them have this cultural connection to cannabis, and a lot of them are excited about what's going to happen, and the opportunities. Imagine if you could just give a whole community jobs in the industry, right? Like
Right.
you could change the way they're looking at things. The thought is like, I might not have to work in retail, I might not have to work in fast food, but I'm a cultivator. I've learned how to become a grower. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And as those opportunities come, a lot of us talk about licensing and ownership and co-ops, but we also have to think about worker protections. Something else that was in the Virginia bill was that cannabis folks really had to stay neutral to union organizing. And that is a way that we can also reform corporation industry. Like that's what cannabis legalization has got to be, is showing a new model of capitalism, to be real, like a regulation that provides some type of pathway for inclusion and equity, where the rest of our business models in this country do not. Right? We actually have an opportunity to create that through regulation and really create and manufacture something new. So that's what I'm excited about. And
I
yeah.
think California did some type of union around cannabis workers, right? I think I was reading something about that.
Yeah, we did. That's what I was saying. So what we had written in was that cannabis owners and the owners had to be actual, the employers. I'm sorry, that's the word I was looking for. The cannabis employers had to be neutral to union organizing. So if you don't know too much about that, a lot of times people hear about union busting. So that means that the business owner and employer cannot put money towards union busting, which is what most people, and like people like Amazon and these other large businesses and corporations do. They spend a lot of money with misinformation campaigns and actual like one-on-one talking to get people to go against that. But as we think about opportunities, think about worker protections and testing positive for cannabis. Are you going to get fired for that? Right? These are all different types of worker protections that can be done at the municipal level as well.
Yes, yes, it definitely can be done, and I'm glad you talked about the municipal level. We have a lot to do, especially at the municipal level in Laurel. There's some things that I want to implement. I more simply, I want us to make sure as a city we're telling the General Assembly that we're supportive of the legalization, and kind of what we're looking for from a municipal standpoint. And then the other thing is it's more of a formality, but just taking a vote as a council to say we're in favor of medical marijuana.
Mm.
And the reason that happens is because there's a lot of bureaucratic hangups. If we don't have that official say so in terms
Yeah.
of sponsorship, partnership. So the thought is like making sure we make it official. It's just really more of a formal resolution. But I know there's other things that you could do, especially around getting like I think the police chief to further deprioritize cannabis arrest and of course other things that you were talking about funding wise and union organizing.
Yeah, and also looking at like your local DSS and like the ways that they're enforcing things like this. Yeah, I mean there are many different ways, and the deprioritizers, not prioritizing this in arrest are things to very much put on record. A lot of times that doesn't necessarily mean things with law enforcement, but that is something that you could say. And I know you said that you all put in a resolution to agree for medical marijuana, but are you all doing it for adult use?
Well, yeah, that was the first one. The first one I was
Okay.
talking about was adult use, and then kind of just saying what we want as a municipality, and then the second one is just a formality of the medical. Yeah,
Yeah, very cool. And yeah, and I just definitely, this is when your community members and just can talk to them about whatever the percentage, like in Virginia, it was 3% would come back to the local municipal council and that budget allocation. So start talking about what you all want with that budget, right? Like, where is it going to go? Because I'm sure as soon as it starts coming, y'all are going to look for holes to fill and things like that. But we should start this conversation early with our folks.
new programs to start. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And so of course you've been here a while. I wanted to ask you a couple rapid questions
Okay.
and get you out of here. So the first question, of course, very simple. Are you a Pepsi or Coke type of person?
Oh man, Pepsi. If I have to choose, I don't really fuck.
Yeah. I mean, hey, that's fair. Pepsi, if you had to choose. Pepsi, if you had to choose. My next question is, what is your favorite strand and why?
Mm. Oh my gosh, I'm not much of a weed head to be doing this right now.
Hey, we know you fighting. You out there fighting. So
I know. Oh man. Look, I'm gonna just say I'm a sativa head, and there's not enough sativa out there right now. I'm good with a sativa hybrid, but I'm looking for a good sativa if anybody wants to jump in my DMs about that.
you said, I'm looking for a good sativa. Hey, absolutely. We all love a good sativa. Preferably, especially in the morning, get that wake up. It's
Yeah.
some of the best time for me, especially. And then the next question I'll ask you is, who is your favorite superhero and why?
Oh my gosh. My favorite superhero and why. I just really kind of got into superheroes because I'm a mama now. Um, you know, Storm was always someone that was big, Black woman, Black Panther, and so Storm, just seeing Black women being courageous. And I mean, honestly, when you said this, my answer would probably be Angela Davis. Dr. Angela Y. Davis is a superhero, and that's who's always been someone I've looked up to. Yeah.
I wish I could meet her. That's definitely one of the people that I want to meet in life.
Yeah.
There's not many people I like to meet in person. She's definitely one of those few.
Sure, truly, truly. I was just really blessed that she was still around in 2020 to kind of witness that and give public commentary and for us to all be able to hear that from someone that's lived through something like this, 5 decades before.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, they were smoking cannabis when it was dangerous. When it was dangerous.
Yeah. And I don't know if anyone's heard Angela Davis talk about the drug war now, because she was really one of, in the 80s and 90s, they started picking up on the patterns about what the drug war was doing in their community and that sort of thing. But to hear her now from being able to witness it as an adult is just really, it's profound and it's inspiring of why we have so much work to do, and particularly in cannabis, why we can't allow this to be a drug war 2.0.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'd say the last question I'd ask you is, I know you know a lot of people in the Maryland area. What is an organization that you feel is doing some great community work, around cannabis and cannabis in the community?
I this is one of those times I'm maybe not going to say anyone specific except for whatever y'all are doing. I know you work with the NAACP. I say
Yeah.
support.
There's so many out there.
Yeah, I do.
There's MD Normal.
Yeah, well, we
Explore
don't
Maryland
mess with
Cannabis.
any normal around here. But yeah, so anyone that Martin's messing with, you're my people now, so I mess with my people's people.
Trust and believe. We have our disagreements.
Sure.
Normal and us, but at the end of the day, we could generally come to the table. And I appreciate now. Normal is led by really two Black women. So I think that I can really have the serious conversation with them.
Right. Yeah. And national normal and the local chapters are very different, but our Virginia normal chapter could use some help with their equity stance at least. But I've seen some really great work from other chapters across the country. And so I'm excited to see what Maryland does with all of the work that's happening.
Yes. And then of course the last question, once we legalize, cannabis, is this gonna push hemp production in the state? Are we gonna have more?
Nah.
No.
Hemp. You said hemp production in the state?
Do you think it's gonna spur more hemp production?
No, I think that hemp is going to take a big hit with this legalization, and even in Virginia, it has. I think that's what we're seeing across the markets is that hemp is no longer going to be as in demand once we open up the legal adult use market.
But I think it's also the fact of like this is a deviation, right? So I think that the hemp is a flower, great, it has some benefits. Yes. But hemp outside of flower has way more benefits, right? Like, so I think that that's really, how we're utilizing hemp and the researches of like how hemp actually can be occupied and can be used.
Yeah. I hope that we are able to focus on that. I will say that because cannabis is what's selling and will sell off the shelf.
But I'm listening. Right? So cannabis is what can sell off of the shelf and will sell right now.
And I think as folks start to learn more about what cannabis they like, whether that's hemp or with THC, that's when we'll learn more of the benefits of hemp in other forms besides flower, right? That's the really great thing about this
building materials. I've seen, several states, approve hemp crate building. That's going to be huge, sustainable, cheaper. But
Virginia I'm really excited. I think if I have this secret dream of being able to like build tiny hemp houses for folks in need of shelter and that sort of thing. I think that we could get incredibly innovative if we got hemp in our hands. But I think again, that's going to be some regulation, some hoops, and we just got to convince us that it's worth it for us. I think you're right. We should fight for that.
Yeah. I mean, well, Chelsea, of course, I've had so much fun. We definitely got to have you back. I would say tell people how they can stay connected with you, how they can reach out to you.
All right. Yep. I am at Chelsea@marijuanajustice.org is my email. You can find Marijuana Justice at THC Justice Now on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our website is marijuanajustice.org, and you can catch us on YouTube as well with all of our videos. That we have lots of conferences and conversations about many different topics because this conversation is so large. But you can follow my personal platforms on Twitter, Chelsea Wise RVA. I have a lot to say on Twitter, and also on Instagram just for fun, Chelsea Higgs Wise.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, Chelsea. Can't wait to see you next time. Yeah. Guys, don't forget. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just sending a reminder that October 18th is the last day for you to register to vote. So if you want to have, an opinion, if you want to have a say-so, this election on, if you approve of responsible adult use for 21 years or older, you got to be registered to vote. So make sure you register to vote because this is an important election. And not only register and vote, vote your conscience, but stay involved because the framework that, we follow for years is being discussed now and will be continued to be discussed into the new year. So we have to continue to be involved and, organized around what we want. So thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. See you next time.
All right.
Someone that you can find to see you through and free your mind. And if you find it's only you, then you can see it through. Yes, you can see it through. There is a me that you can see that tells the truth courageously. 'Cause peace of mind lives in the truth. Remember, you can see it through. Yes, you can see you through. La 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 la, 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 la 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 la. La 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 la. There is someone that you can find to see you through and free your mind. And if you find it's only you, then you can see you through. Yes, you can see you through. There is a me that you can see that tells the truth courageously. 'Cause peace of mind lives in the truth. Remember, you can see you through. Yes, you can see you through.